My knees hit the snow before I could stop them. Not from weakness, from the force of it. 3 impacts in quick succession, the kind that bypass pain entirely and go straight to the body, shutting down non-essential functions to keep the important ones running. I could feel the cold through my torn clothing. I could feel the blood on my face. I could feel the circle of wolves around me, close enough that escape had stopped being a calculation worth running. I had lost. By every measure anyone in this kingdom used to evaluate such things, I had lost completely. Then I heard her voice. Stop. One word. Quiet. But carrying the specific weight of someone whose words have never needed volume to be obeyed. The wolves around me stopped. I looked up. She was standing at the edge of the circle, Alpha Princess Seraphine, the most powerful unmated female wolf in the kingdom, the woman every alpha in 3 territories had spent years trying to impress. And she was looking at me with an expression I had never seen directed at me before. No pity, not contempt, not the particular brand of dismissive irritation that was the most attention I had ever managed to generate from someone of her rank. She was crying. I did not understand that. I did not have time to understand it. Because in the same moment that I registered the tears on her face, something happened inside me that I have no clean way to describe even now. A sound, not external, internal, like a frequency that bypasses the ears entirely and arrives directly in the center of the chest. Then a voice. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to subscribe. It helps the channel grow and ensures you never miss the next chapter of these unforgettable Alpha King and Luna tales. Ancient Alpha System. Activated. Golden light exploded across my vision. Symbols I had never seen. Characters from no language I recognized, arranged in patterns that somehow felt like coming home, spread across the air around me like cracks of light through dark stone. The wolves around me stumbled backward. The princess's eyes went wide. The pain in my body, the accumulated damage of 3 years of being exactly what everyone had decided I was, went completely, instantly, silent. I rose to my feet, not because I decided to, because something older than my decisions had been decided for me. Seraphine stared at me, the tears still on her face, the expression no longer grief, something more complicated than grief. Something that looked like the specific shock of a person watching the thing they believed most completely about the world turned out to be wrong. Who? She whispered. Who are you? I looked at my own hands. The golden light is still moving across my skin, like something waking up after a very long sleep. I did not have an answer. Not yet. 3 days earlier, I was the kingdom's embarrassment. The wolf every she-wolf rejected. The man nobody would stand beside. They were not entirely wrong. They were about to learn what happens when the weakest wolf wakes up. I am 18 years old. I have never shifted. Not once. Which would have been strange enough on its own. It became stranger when my mother found my name in a record written 200 years before I was born. But to understand why that mattered, to understand why a princess would one day stand over my bleeding body with tears on her face, you need to understand Ironvale. Ironvale is not a cruel place by intention. That is the difficult thing about it. The people who built its rules believed they were building something strong, something that would survive. And perhaps once, those rules made sense in the way all rules make sense when the world they were designed for still exists. The world Ironvale was designed for no longer exists, but the rules remained. Worth in Ironvale is simple. Worth is measurable. Male wolves are expected to manifest their wolf form by 16, training for warrior rank by 17, demonstrated alpha potential by 18, or permanent assignment to the labor tiers, the packers, the builders, the wolves who serve the ones who fought their way to something better. It is not considered cruel. It is considered an order. The strong lead. The capable serve. The weak. The weak are a problem the kingdom has never quite decided what to do with. My name is Kael. 4 examinations between 12 and 16. 4 identical conclusions. Healthy, intact, empty. The healers stopped scheduling follow-up appointments after the 4th. There was a particular way they looked at my mother when they delivered the news. Not at me. Never at me. That I understood even at 12. The look of professionals delivering a verdict they have already made peace with. The empty wolf. That was what the children called me first. Children are efficient with cruelty in the way adults learn to disguise. They find the word that fits the wound exactly and use it without ceremony. By the time I was 15, it had spread beyond the children. Said near my face, in the specific volume calibrated to be audible without being direct enough to require acknowledgement. I learned to make myself small, to occupy as little space as possible and hope the attention moves on. At the time, I had no idea that Princess Seraphine even knew my name. My father had learned to look slightly to the left of wherever I was standing. Not deliberately cruel, he had simply run out of ways to reconcile the son he expected with the son he received. He was a respected warrior. 3 commendations from the pack commander. A wolf that had come at 14, which was considered auspicious. I was his only son. I did not hate him for it. Hating requires energy I had learned to conserve. My mother's name was Ilara. She worked in the kingdom's record hall, cataloging, organizing, maintaining the archive of pack histories that most wolves considered administrative rather than important. She did not consider it administrative. She was the only person in the kingdom who did not look at me with a look. No pity, not careful avoidance, not contempt. She looked at me like her archive records, like something that contained more than was immediately visible, like something that rewarded patience and attention. You were not born empty, she told me when I was 14. No preamble, no softening, just that. Everyone says, everyone is reading the surface, she said. I have spent 20 years learning that the most important things are never on the surface. I wanted to believe her. I was 14, and I had been called the empty wolf for 2 years, and I wanted, with a desperation I would not have admitted to anyone, to believe her. Why? I asked. Why do you think that? She was quiet for a long moment, making a decision about how much to say. Because of what I found in the archive, she said. 3 years ago, a record that should not exist, that someone tried very hard to make sure no one would find it. What record? She looked at her hands, then at me. One that has your name in it, she said quietly. Written 200 years before you were born. The kitchen was completely still. That's not possible, I said. No, she agreed. It isn't. She did not explain further that night. But I watched her after that. The specific patience of a person waiting for something they are completely certain is coming. And I understood that whatever she had found in that archive, it had not frightened her. It had made her certain. I did not know what she knew. I did not know why my name existed 2 centuries before I was born. But on the morning, everything changed. On the morning, the snow and the blood and the golden light rewrote everything I thought I knew about myself. I finally began to understand why she had never stopped waiting. The mating festival comes every year on the first full moon of winter. In Ironvale, it was the most significant social event the calendar produced. 3 days of ceremony, culminating in the choosing night, where unmated she-wolves walked the festival floor and extended their hand to the wolf they selected. A gesture that meant consideration, that meant possibility, that meant, at minimum, acknowledgement that the wolf standing before them was worth looking at. It was voluntary. That was what the elders always said. But in a kingdom where worth was measured by rank, and rank was measured by the quality of your match, not presenting yourself was its own kind of statement. The kind that followed you. I presented myself. My mother had pressed my best clothing the night before, had stood behind me at the mirror that morning, with her hands on my shoulders, and looked at my reflection with that expression. The patient, absolute certainty that had lived in her eyes since she found the record. Go, she said. Hold your head up. I held my head up, for as long as I could. I stood at the far end of the presentation line. 32 wolves are arranged by rank from highest to lowest. The far end was where the light was thinnest, where the attention of the room had usually moved on before it reached you. The first 3 she-wolves did not reach the end of the line. The 4th reached me, looked at me with an expression caught between discomfort and reluctant compassion. Pity. She moved on without stopping. The room did not react. That was almost worse than if it had. The 5th, 6th, and 7th passed the same way. Each one found something to examine in the middle distance when they arrived at my position. The 8th did not look in my direction at all. Then came Kael, dark-haired, confidence, daughter of a senior warrior. She walked the line with her chin up and her eyes moving efficiently across each face, the walk of someone who has already made her decision and is performing the ceremony as a formality. She reached me, stopped, looked at me directly, which was more than most had managed. Then she said, clearly enough for the nearest section of the assembled pack to hear, "I would rather remain unmated forever." She walked on. The room was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then the sound that is worse than laughter, the collective exhale of a crowd that has just witnessed something they are grateful did not happen to them, moved through the hall like a tide. I held my head up. I had promised my mother. The 10th she-wolf was Nara. We had grown up 3 houses apart. I learned to read the same year from the same elder. Spent enough shared childhood that the word friend was not inaccurate, or had not been, before my failure to shift became the defining fact of my existence. She had never called me the empty wolf. I want to be precise about that. She had simply, gradually, without announcement, stopped being present, stopped seeking me out, stopped making eye contact in the way of someone who finds that easier than explaining why the distance had grown. She walked the floor with careful eyes moving through the line. She reached me. For one moment, brief and treacherous, her eyes met mine, and something moved in them that I recognized. Not attraction, no consideration. Recognition. The specific recognition of someone who remembers who you were before the world decided what you were worth. Then, it was gone. She looked away, moved on, extended her hand to a mid-ranked warrior, 4 positions up the line. Did not look back. I understood, with the particular finality of something you have been half-knowing and have finally finished knowing. The others had rejected what they saw when they looked at me. Nara had rejected what she remembered. That was its own kind of wound. The ceremony ended. I walked toward the eastern door. Not running. I had promised my mother I would hold my head up, and I intended to keep that promise for as long as I was visible. The whispers followed at the specific volume I had learned to recognize. Audible, deniable, the empty wolf. I pushed through the eastern door into the cold night air, stood in the dark outside the lit warmth of the hall, and let my head drop for the first time since morning. The cold was clean, at least. The cold did not have opinions about what I was worth. Somewhere inside the hall, 31 wolves were beginning the rest of their lives. I was standing in the dark wondering if I had one worth beginning. The answer was yes. 3 days later, I would be bleeding in the snow while a princess cried over my body. But that night, I did not know that yet. The northern road ended 3 hours past the Iron Veil Gate. Not gradually, it simply stopped. The maintained stone path that connected the kingdom's outer districts gave way to packed earth, then to mud frozen hard beneath a thin skin of snow, then to nothing at all. Just trees, old ones, the kind that have been standing long enough to stop caring about the things moving beneath them. I had been walking since midday. The cold was different out here. Inside Iron Veil's borders, there were walls, fires, the accumulated warmth of bodies and buildings pressing back against the winter. Out here the cold was uncontested. It came from every direction simultaneously, and it was not cruel, and it was not kind. It simply was, the way mountains simply are, indifferent to whether you found it survivable. I found a hollow at the base of a ridge as the light failed and pressed myself into it and told myself I would rest for an hour. I woke to darkness and something moving at the edge of the trees. I heard it before I saw it. A sound between breathing and grinding, the specific acoustic quality of something large moving through frozen undergrowth, with the unhurried confidence of an animal that has not needed to develop stealth because nothing in this forest has ever threatened it. I pressed back against the rock and reached for my knife. It emerged from the tree line 30 feet away. I do not have a clean name for what it was. The wolves of Ironvale had stories about the creatures that lived in the territories beyond the borders. Stories told to children to establish the importance of staying within packlands, which meant the stories were probably half truth and half utility. I had always assumed the utility outweighed the truth. I was wrong. It was large, low to the ground but massive through the shoulders, moving on 6 limbs with a rolling, deliberate gait that covered ground faster than the pace suggested. Its eyes caught the moonlight and held it, flat silver, no depth, the eyes of something that did not process the world the way prey does. It had seen me. It was not in a hurry, because it did not need to. I had 1 knife and no wolf and 3 hours of walking behind me and nothing in any direction that was going to help. I ran. Not a good decision tactically. Running triggers pursuit responses in predators, and I knew that. Knew it the way you know things that are completely useless when your body has already made the decision and your mind is simply being carried along. I ran through the dark between the trees, with the sound of 6-limbed pursuit behind me, growing rather than diminishing, and the branches cutting at my face, and the frozen ground uncertain beneath every step. I went down hard on the 3rd fall. Left knee, a root hidden under snow. The impact was complete, the kind that sends white light across the vision and removes, briefly, the ability to process anything beyond the fact of it. I lay on the frozen ground and heard the thing behind me slow, no longer needing to run either. My hand found the pendant through my clothing. I do not know why, not a conscious decision, the same instinct that had made my eyes find the symbol and sent that impossible recognition through my chest. My fingers closed around it through the fabric and light. Not the pale silver of moonlight, gold, warm and sourceless, emanating from the pendant through the layers of clothing as though the fabric wasn't there. It spread across the snow around me in a perfect circle, sharp-edged and absolute. The creature stopped. I ran through the trees with a 6-limbed pursuit behind me, branches cutting my face and frozen ground breaking beneath every desperate step. It stepped back. Then again. Then it turned and moved into the trees, and the sound of it diminished and the forest went quiet. I lay on the frozen ground, breathing hard, with golden light pooling around me from a pendant my grandfather had left for a grandson he had died before meeting. Like remembering something I had never learned, I pressed my hand flat against it through my clothing. The light pulsed once, warm, deliberate, like a heartbeat answering mine. Then it went still, but not dark. It stayed warm against my chest for the rest of the night. I found the ruins the next morning. Not by intention, I had been following the direction my mother had indicated, north, past the Ashridge border, with no clearer destination than the unfinished sentence she had not been allowed to complete. The forest thinned without warning into a clearing that should not have existed. The trees around it were ancient, far older than the ones I had been moving through, thick enough that 3 men with linked arms could not have circled their trunks. They stood in a perfect ring around the clearing, with the deliberate arrangement of something planted rather than grown, something placed. Inside the ring, ruins. Stone, old stone, the kind whose age you feel rather than calculate. Walls that had been significant once and had subsided over centuries into suggestions of themselves. Archways are still standing through some combination of engineering and stubbornness. Carvings covering every surface, not random, not decorative, purposeful. The same symbol that was on my pendant, repeated and varied and interconnected across every stone face in patterns that my eyes kept trying to read as language without finding the entry point. At the center of the clearing, a wolf. Stone. Enormous. Twice the height of any wolf I had seen shift, 4 times the mass. Carved with a precision that the centuries had not managed to degrade. Every line of fur, every muscle beneath the stone surface, every detail of the face rendered with the kind of attention that comes from someone who was not imagining their subject, but remembering it. It was sitting. Not aggressive. Not posed for power. Simply sitting. The way a wolf sits when it has been waiting long enough that the waiting has become its natural state. Patient. Still. Certain that what it is waiting for will eventually arrive. I walked toward it. The pendant was warm against my chest. warmer with every step. I stopped at the base of the stone wolf and looked up at its face, at the carved eyes that were somehow, in a way I could not explain and did not try to, not entirely empty. And I waited for something I could not have named. The ground beneath my feet hummed. A single low vibration, like a frequency older than sound. Then the stone wolf's eyes opened. Not metaphorically, not the trick of light on carved surfaces. The eyes opened, and inside them was light, the exact color and quality of the light that had poured from my pendant in the dark. Gold. Warm, sourceless. The stone wolf looked at me. And when it spoke, the sound arrived, not through my ears, but through the same place the pendant's recognition had arrived. Directly in the chest, bypassing everything that could doubt it. At last, it said. The voice was enormous and ancient and completely, absolutely certain. The last heir has returned. The clearing was silent. The pendant against my chest burned like a second heartbeat. Heir, I thought. I had been called many things in 18 years. The empty wolf, the burden, the mistake of biology that a well-ordered kingdom had no place for. Heir. Heir to what? I asked. The stone wolf looked at me with eyes full of gold light, and began to answer. The stone wolf spoke, and I listened. There were once other alphas, it said. Other kingdoms? No, it said. Other kinds of power. Before the 7-pack system. Before the territorial borders. Before the council structures that Iron Vale and every kingdom like it considered the natural and inevitable shape of the wolf world, there had been a different kind of alpha. Not different in degree, different in kind. The ancient alpha bloodline did not rule through dominance. The stone wolf said, their authority came from something older than rank, something your world has spent centuries pretending never existed. What? The first current, the original force from which all wolf power derives. It paused. Where ordinary alphas draw from it, the way a torch draws from fire, consuming as they take, the ancient alphas were connected to it directly. Not drawing from it, part of it. What happened to them? The golden eyes darkened slightly. The other bloodlines understood what the ancient alphas represented, it said. Not a rival, an obsolescence. So they moved against them, not in open war, through patience, through generations of careful elimination. One member at a time, until nothing remained but ruins and a symbol on a pendant. It looked at me steadily. The world you know was built on their graves. The clearing was very quiet. And I am the last, the stone wolf said. Your grandfather was the final confirmed ancient alpha. He knew what was coming. He placed a bloodline suppression on your wolf at birth. Not because your wolf did not exist, because if it had manifested at the natural age, they would have found you before you were old enough to survive what finding you would mean. He gave you 18 years of invisibility, it said, and left the key with the one person he trusted to keep it safe, my mother. 20 years in the archive, 4 years of certain, patient waiting. She had known. She had always known. Ancient alpha system, the stone wolf said. Final initialization sequence. Heir confirmed. Bloodline suppression. Dissolved. Then, ancient alpha system. Online. The words arrived not through my ears but through my chest. Through whatever part of a wolf is deeper than hearing. And everything happened at once. The pendant went from warm to burning. Not painful. The opposite of painful. The feeling of blood returning to a limb numb for so long you forgot it was supposed to feel anything. Golden symbols spread across my vision, like cracks of light through dark stone. And in the deepest part of me, the part that had been silent for 18 years, something moved. Not a tremor, not the preliminary shiver of a normal first shift, something enormous and ancient, uncurling from a sleep so long that waking felt like a geological event. Like a mountain deciding to stand up. My wolf. My wolf. It was not a separate thing inside me. It was me. The most fundamental version of me. Before the suppression. Before the exile. Before 18 years of being told I contained nothing. It was me, remembering itself. I dropped to my knees in the snow. First ability unlocked. The system said. Wolf sense. You perceive what threatens those under your protection before the threat becomes visible. Second ability unlocked. Rapid restoration. Wounds reject permanence. Third ability unlocked. Alpha presence. The world remembers what you are before others do. I looked at my hands. Golden light moved across the skin like something waking up after a very long sleep. And then I cried. Not immediately. It arrived the way real things arrive. Slowly. From somewhere deeper than the decision to feel it. Not because I was powerful. Because of the festival floor. Because of my father's eyes finding the ground. Because of my mother's hands pulled from mine before she could finish the sentence. Because of 18 years of empty wolf, said in the specific volume, calibrated to wound without accountability. I pressed my fist against my chest where the pendant burned and felt my wolf press back from the inside. Solid, enormous, absolutely certain, and I understood something no evaluation, no ceremony, no verdict had ever given me. I belonged somewhere. I had always belonged somewhere. Somewhere had simply been waiting for me to find it. The stone wolf watched me until I was finished. Then its golden eyes darkened. "There is much to do," it said, "and very little time." I rose to my feet, wiped my face. I looked at the gold light still moving across my skin. "Then tell me everything," I said. The stone wolf was quiet for one moment. "The bloodline that hunted your ancestors," it said, "has finally found you." The stone wolf did not give me time to be afraid. "Shift," it said. You have never been allowed to. That is different from being unable." Its golden eyes held mine. "Your wolf has been present for 18 years. It knows what to do. The only question is whether you will let it." I looked at my hands. The golden light is still moving across the skin, beneath the surface, pressing outward with the patient certainty of something that had been waiting a very long time for permission. I exhaled, and let go of the 18 years. The shift arrived like a tide. Not violent, not the painful, disorienting battle my body is fighting itself that Iron Veil's warriors always described. Mine was not a fight, it was a recognition. Every part of me that had spent 18 years pressing against a suppression it did not understand, simply expanded into the shape that had always been waiting. When the golden light cleared, I was standing on 4 legs in the snow. I looked at my reflection in a frozen pool at the clearing's edge. I had spent 18 years imagining what my wolf might look like. I had never imagined this. Enormous. Silver, not gray, silver, carrying its own low luminescence the way certain metals shift in changing light. Across the shoulders, chest, and jaw, ancient markings, dark against the silver. The symbol from the pendant, rendered now in living fur. The ancient alpha mark. Worn by a bloodline the world had spent centuries trying to erase. Wearing me now, I felt the first current moving through me. Constant, sourceless, completely mine, not a resource being drawn upon. The difference between holding a torch and being fired. This, I thought, is what they were afraid of. I do not know how long I stood there before the forest moved again. 3 creatures, the same species as the one from the night before, moving in coordinated formation, flanking approach, efficient and practiced. They saw me. The coordination fractured. They recalibrated, spread into flanking positions, decided that whatever stood in this clearing was not prey, but was also not something they would retreat from without testing. The wolf sense showed me all 3 approach vectors simultaneously. The timing, the angles, the exact moment the lead creature would commit. I crossed the clearing in a blur and struck it with enough force to send it rolling through the snow before it had finished the commitment. The second pulled back when the alpha presence hit it. Not a conscious choice, something older than choice. Its nervous system remembering, in a frequency below thought. The world remembers what you are before others do. It retreated. The third held 3 seconds longer. Then it was gone too. I stood in the clearing and let the first current settle. Then the system spoke. The clearing seemed to grow quieter. Warning, I stilled. Power without purpose creates monsters. The words carried the weight of long experience distilled to its essential truth. Not a threat, a fact. Offered without embellishment because it required none. I understood. not as a restriction, as a question. What is your purpose? I did not have the complete answer, but I knew where it began. My mother's unfinished sentence, a name written in a record 2 centuries before my birth, a gate that had closed behind me and left 31 wolves inside its beginning, lives in a kingdom that had decided, without asking, what each of them was worth. And something else. As I turned toward Ironvale, a strange certainty moved through me, quiet and absolute, like the first current itself. Someone was waiting. I did not know who, only that my path no longer belonged entirely to me. I had been cast out as the empty wolf. I was going back, because the answers were there. My mother's sentence, the record with my name, whatever had been hidden inside Ironvale's walls for 18 years, alongside me. I turned and ran, not away from something, toward. I heard them before I saw them. 3 rogues, 1 female voice, controlled, strained. 3 male voices responded with the casual confidence of numbers. I moved through the trees without deciding to. She had her back to a rock face, with a knife in her right hand and her chin level, calculating, not panicking. The 3 rogues had the loose, unhurried posture of wolves, who had decided this did not require effort. The alpha presence reached the clearing before I did. 2 of them stepped back immediately. The third, the largest, took 1 step toward me instead. Then it hit him fully. I watched the confidence leave his face. His eyes widened slightly. He looked at me the way the creatures in the forest had looked at me, the involuntary recognition of something older than his experience telling him to reconsider. He stepped back. "Leave," he muttered to the others, and they did. I looked at the young woman. She was looking at me with complicated feelings about being rescued. "I had it managed," she said. "You did," I agreed. "I just made it faster." She studied me. "Put the knife away. Where are you headed?" she asked. "South, eventually." Something moved in her expression. A quick decision. "I'm going south," she said. Her name, she told me, was Sarah. I did not press for more. She did not press me either. We traveled in the quiet of 2 people who had both learned that silence is frequently better than conversation, that costs more than it gives. 2 hours in, she spoke. "Most people would have kept walking," she said. "I've heard that before. A kingdom that decided it was finished with you," I said, when she asked where I came from. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know what it's like to disappoint someone you love," she said quietly. "My father wanted a version of me that never existed." She looked into the fire we had built as the light failed. I kept trying anyway. Losing myself seemed easier than losing him. "Did it work?" "No," she said, "but I kept trying." I looked at the fire. "I understand that," I said. "I know," she said. "I can tell." She smiled then. Small, brief, but it changed her face completely. And for reasons I could not explain, I found myself smiling back. For the first time since the gate had closed behind me, I forgot to feel alone. I did not know her real name until morning. Her horse had found us in the night, well-bred, wearing a saddle marked with a crest I recognized immediately. My breath caught. Every wolf in Ironvale knew that crest. I looked from the saddle to her face. "Your Princess Seraphine." She held my gaze without flinching, without apologizing. The composure of someone who has been found out and has decided it is not the end of the conversation. "Yes," she said simply. "The Alpha King's daughter. The most powerful unmated female wolf in 3 territories." She had spent one evening sitting across a fire from the wolf Ironvale had exiled as useless, and had talked to me like I was worth talking to. "And?" I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "I think," she said quietly, "that Ironvale made a very significant mistake." She mounted her horse, looked down at me. "Whatever you're going back for, be careful. My father's kingdom is not kind to wolves who don't fit its categories." She rode south. I watched her go. I did not know that 3 days later I would be kneeling in the snow with blood on my face while she cried over me. I only knew one thing. Meeting Seraphine in that forest had not been an accident. It had been the beginning. I smelled the smoke 3 hours south of where I had left Seraphine. Not woodfire, structures, Homes. I ran. The outer district was burning. 3 homes have already collapsed. 2 wolves down near the well. A child crying somewhere in the smoke. 8 professional attackers moving through the haze in coordinated formation, cutting off escape routes with practiced efficiency. The stone wolf's warning landed in my chest. The bloodline that hunted your ancestors has finally found you. They had not come for the pack. They had come for me. I stood at the tree line for 30 seconds. Honest accounting. They had called me the empty wolf for 6 years. My father had looked at the floor. The northern gate had closed behind me without appeal. 30 seconds. Then my mother's voice. Strength exists to protect. I was already moving before the thought finished. The shift happened mid-stride. The first attacker lunged without hesitation. The wolf sense showed me the strike before he finished deciding it. I stepped aside. He crashed through empty space. I hit him once on the way down. Just enough. He stayed down. The second redirect. The third hesitated. That hesitation was all I needed. The alpha presence spread through the formation like a shockwave. The best ones held. Professionals fight through pressure. But holding is not advancing. An enemy no longer advancing is an enemy losing. The pack wolves used the opening. Not with efficiency, with fury. Labor tier wolves, mid-ranked families. The ones the hierarchy had spent years deciding were lesser. Fighting like they were not. 20 minutes later, the attackers withdrew. I shifted back in the smoke and firelight. Stood in the street I had grown up in. Silence. Then, Kael, uncertain. Like someone testing a word they were not sure applied. Another voice, quieter. The empty wolf? They stood at the edges of the street and looked at me, at the markings on my hands, at whatever had changed in my face in 48 hours. Then my mother was crossing the street with tears already on her face. She took my face in both hands. "You found it," she said. "I found it. I knew," she whispered. "I always knew they were wrong about you." One moment, eyes closed. Then, "Get everyone to the inner district. They'll regroup." She nodded and turned back. I looked at the street, at the wolves watching me, with something I had no name for yet. They were alive. That was enough. Then the wolf sense exploded through my chest. New presence, powerful, fast. Southern road. A rider in black armor emerged from the smoke. Behind them, the thunder of an organized force. The system spoke. "Warning, the primary threat has arrived." The rider in black armor stopped at the district's edge. Behind him were at least 30 wolves, moving in disciplined formation, wearing the same professional markings as the 8 I had driven back from the eastern district. The 8 had not been attacked. They had been the scouts. This was the actual force. The rider removed his helmet. Pack Commander Aldrich Vane. He had not come to negotiate. The inner district had been filled with evacuees by the time the force reached the gate. Families crowded together in the square. Warriors lined the walls. Children clung to their parents. Smoke drifted overhead. No one had noticed me yet. I stood near the northern entrance in ordinary human form, looking exactly like the wolf who had been marched out of this kingdom 2 days ago. The gate commander saw me first. He frowned. "You," he said slowly, "you were exiled." "Yes." "Then you shouldn't be here." "Probably not." He looked like he had several more things to say. Then something struck the outer wall. The entire square jumped. Another impact. Then another. The conversation ended. Panic spread quickly. Warriors rushed to defensive positions. Families pulled children behind them. Orders were shouted from every direction. I looked at the wall. I could already feel it. The wolf sense. The attackers were concentrating on one section, the eastern support beam. They were seconds away from breaking through. Now, I stepped into the center of the square and shifted. The light came first. Golden. Warm. Impossible. It spread outward from the pendant like a sunrise exploding across the square. Then my wolf emerged. Silver fur. Ancient markings. A size that no wolf in Iron Vale had ever possessed. The square went completely silent. I had spent 18 years being invisible here. No one had ever looked at me twice. Now nobody could look anywhere else. Another impact hit the wall. I moved. The alpha presence surged outward. I felt it pass through the square, through the walls, through the attacking force beyond them. Then, silence. The impacts stopped. I reached the wall and looked through the breach. 30 professional wolves stood outside. Every one of them had taken an involuntary step backward. Not from fear, recognition. The world remembers what I was before they understood it. At the center of the force, Commander Vane stared at me. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty on his face. One word broke the silence. Withdraw. No one moved. His voice became sharper. Withdraw. The force turned. Within moments, they were disappearing into the darkness. The square remained silent long after they were gone. I shifted back, turned, and found 200 wolves staring at me. I recognized almost every face. Dara stood near the well with her hand over her mouth. 3 senior warriors looked as though the world had just changed shape. Nara stood beside a group of families. She met my eyes. And this time, she didn't look away. Then I saw Kael, the she-wolf who had said, "I would rather remain unmated forever." She looked as though she barely recognized the words anymore. She stepped forward, one step, then another. "Kael," she said softly. Her voice trembled. "Please, help us." Behind her stood dozens of others. The same people who had called me the empty wolf. The same people who had watched me leave through the northern gate. Now they looked at me as though I might save them. I looked at the injured near the well, at the smoke, at the frightened child peeking from behind his mother's leg. I remembered 30 seconds at the tree line. I remembered what my mother had taught me. Strength exists to protect, not because people deserve it, because that is what strength is for. "Get the injured inside," I said. The square seemed to exhale. "Reinforce the eastern wall. I want water lines prepared in case the fire spreads." I looked at the warriors. "And send your 3 best trackers south. If they regroup, I want to know where." People moved immediately. Purpose replaced panic. Kael remained where she stood. "Thank you," she said quietly. I met her eyes. "Don't thank me." A pause. "Just remember this, the next time you decide someone's worth." She lowered her head. Could not answer. I turned and found my mother standing at the edge of the square, watching me, the same certainty in her eyes, the same patient belief she had carried for 4 years. This time, there were tears in them, but she was smiling. She said nothing. She did not need to. Behind me, the square was alive with movement, and at the center of it stood the wolf Ironvale had called useless, not because they had finally given him a place, because he had become impossible to ignore. Commander Vane stepped forward when he saw me crossing the burned ground alone. "You were supposed to be nothing," he said. "I know," I said. "I was told the same thing. Stand down. You are 1 wolf. We are 30. Then let's see what 30 is worth." I did not perform well. Did not display aggression. Simply stood in the burned street and let the first current move through me the way it had learned to. Outward, steady, ancient. The formation behind Vane shifted. 1 wolf dropped to 1 knee. Then another. Then 5 more. Not in surrender. In instinct. Something older than loyalty recognizing something older than kings. Their bodies responded before their minds could stop them. Vane stared at them. Then he looked at me. And for the first time that night, I saw fear. "This isn't finished," he said quietly. "No," I agreed. "It isn't." He turned. The formation withdrew. The dark swallowed them. She was waiting at the inner gate. Royal crest visible. Spine straight. No longer performing ordinariness. She held out a document as I reached her. Old parchment, translucent at the edges. I took it. Old woven script. The symbol at the top is identical to my pendant, my markings, and the ruins. Surrounded by a designation I read 3 times before accepting. First Wolf King. Ancient bloodline. Primary heir. 2 years. she said. I followed the trail for 2 years. I did not know I would find you specifically. A pause. I am glad I did. The square behind me had gone completely silent. Then Seraphine did something that sent a sound through 200 wolves like wind through an open door. She knelt, the Alpha King's daughter, on one knee, in a burned district, before the wolf Ironveil had called empty. You are not merely an alpha, she said clearly. You are the heir of the first Wolf King, the one our ancestors swore would return when the wolf world lost its way. Silence. I looked at the document in my hands. Then I looked toward my mother. She was not surprised. She was not crying. She was simply smiling, the same patient smile she had worn for 4 years, as if she had spent her entire life waiting for the world to finally meet the sun she always knew she had. The system spoke. New primary mission issued. Restore the ancient Alpha bloodline. Unite what was divided. Reclaim what was erased. Then, warning, ancient enemy factions have awakened. They know your name. Estimated time until first contact. Unknown. I looked at Seraphine. She rose, met my eyes. I know what comes next, she said quietly. And I came back, she said. Didn't I? I folded the document against the pendant. I looked at the burned horizon, cut to black. The boy they called Empty was gone. In his place stood the last heir of the first Wolf King, and somewhere in the dark, the people who murdered his bloodline had just learned he was alive. Can Kael restore what was erased before his enemies finish what they started? Will Seraphine stand beside him when her father's kingdom becomes the obstacle? Will the pack that rejected him earn the protection he keeps giving them? And the question that matters most, will power change him, or finally heal him? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story kept you here, you already know what to do. Subscribe. Because the heir of the first Wolf King has a bloodline to restore, and we are going with him.